I'm back with the round 6 updates of the FIDE-Chess.com Grand Swiss, and we have Grandmaster Sasikiran joining the leaders at 4.5 points. Let's get started with that game. Here we have Grandmaster Sasikiran playing the black side, and he played the Nimzo Indian. And this is the e3 variation of the Nimzo Indian. And in this position, after knight e5, Grandmaster Sasikiran came up with a novelty. He played knight c6 in this position. And the point is, if white takes knight c6, bc6, black wants to play c5 pawn break, and also get this pawn also to c5 and play this position. The pawn on e4 could be considered as one of the advantages for black, since it's a middle game and the bishop is still inside. So considering these factors, I think this move is viable. But in the game, Predke Alexander did not capture the knight. He played queen c2, which turned out to be dubious, and the Grandmaster Sasikiran played knight e5 followed by knight g4, and then he won the pawn quickly. White tried to complicate the matters by going into an opposite color bishop middle game, but Grandmaster Sasikiran nullified all the threats and eventually won the game. There were some cool pawn breaks in this game. For example, in this position after queen a4, in order to get that d5 square, Sasikiran played b5, which I liked very much. The point is, if queen takes b5, then there is a rook b8, and if you take queen takes g5, there is a rook into b2 check first, and after king c3 there is edge g5. Because the rook on f4 is attacked, black need not worry about the rook on b2. So in this position after b5, white played c takes b5, and black played queen d5, and after this centralization of the queen, black was always better. After queen b4, c5, queen c3, he picked up the pawn, and then another pawn break with a6. I also would like to show you the last shot. In this position after bishop g5, it looks like the pawn on f6 is in danger, but Grandmaster Sasikiran had prepared a counter blow starting with rook b1 check followed by g3, and if king takes the pawn on g3, there is this rook g1 check skewer, and you win the bishop. And there's no stalemate because white has a rook and a pawn. So that was how Grandmaster Sasikiran won his game. Let's now go to the game of Nihal Sarin. He drew his game against David Navara, and here Nihal was white, and he chose this rare move, I would say, bishop b5 check. And after a few moves with bishop x6, Nihal Sarin won the queen, but he had to give up 2 rooks in return. And after all the exchanges, Nihal had this pawn, and it was certain that he would at least win a rook for it. He did so, but David Navara had set up a fortress, and this bishop goes for the pawn on a6, and still this position is draw. So after a few moves, they agreed to a draw. The rook on f5 has another safe square on h5, and white's pawns are doubled. So based on these factors, it is clear that black has a fortress and white has no winning plan. They agreed to a draw. Next, in the game between Blue Bomb and Harikrishna, Harikrishna was black, and it was a solid draw, I would say. White played this queen c2 variation against the Slav, but black remained solid throughout the game. They agreed to a draw after b5, AB, AB, CB, and here the draw was agreed. I think after bishop b5, he was probably considering knight d6. And there's just one pawn that black needs to be worried about, but there's no second weakness. I think this position is very much holdable, but here they agreed to a draw. Next, we have the game between Onischuk and Arjun Erigaisi. Arjun was black, and I want to show you one moment in this game. In a queen endgame, I think that moment is here. After king g3, the best move for black was queen h1. The point is, it takes care of all the squares on the h line, and let's say white plays something like d5, then there is a perpetual check here, and it's a draw. If white wants to keep playing for more, then he might even get in danger. For example, there is a surprise or a shocking checkmate after king e3. So yes, after queen h1, black still had chance to equalize, but after queen e4, queen check and queen check followed by bishop f7 and bishop into b3, the chances were very slim and Onischuk won the game against Arjun. Next we have the game between Mamedov and Ganguly. I think Ganguly was never in danger in this game. He played the black side and it was an Italian game. This was the final position after knight f5. This is where they agreed to a draw. I think this is a pretty solid position. This is an end game and they decided to agree to a draw in this position. One possible continuation could be, let's say, bishop d2 since the bishop was attacked, and then let's say rook c8 attacking the knight on c5, and here probably b4 is a possibility. So this could have happened, but the game ended in a draw there. Next we have the game between Gukesh and Ronak Advani. Here Ronak Advani chose the Ragozin against Gukesh, and there was queen a4 check. In this position after rook e8, I think this rook e8 is rare, it was only played once before, and after rook e8, h3, bishop e6, Ronak provoked his opponent to play f4 and he maintained strong control over the e4 square throughout the game. For instance, he brought his pieces and now came bishop c3 followed by queen c5, making sure that this pawn doesn't come to e4, and then you see bishop f5. The point is, if bishop f5, then there is rook d1 followed by queen f5. That's what happened in the game. And in the next few moves, this bishop came in danger because it was about to get trapped, but through some tactical means Gukesh was able to save the bishop. For example, here he found bishop e5 and he's still in the game, but then later he lost a piece. In this position he played in this position after knight c5, queen c4, queen e6, queen e6, rook e6, he played bishop c3, and then after knight e4 black was in control. Later he lost the piece on e1, you can see, with knight d3, and so Gukesh gave up the piece and then Ronak won the game. Next we have the game between Sethuraman and Anton Demchenko. I think there was one critical moment in the game where the game changed completely in white's favor, and that was this moment after g4, bishop g6, bishop f6, and then knight d6. Here after e5, Anton Demchenko played bishop e5, and after bishop into g6, it was black who was in the driving seat with bishop into d6. Considering that the white's king side is slightly exposed, white had to play knight takes e5, and let's say after rook takes d6, there is queen f3, and this position is possible to play. But he took this bishop and they got this opposite color bishop position, and I think black is very much ahead here because these are weak squares, and after a few moves Sethuraman's king was in danger, so here he resigned. Next we have the game between Alexei Sarana and Praggnanandhaa. I have not seen Praggnanandhaa play this semi-terrace before, but this is probably the first time. I might be wrong, but this is probably one game where I remember he's playing this semi-terrace. And I think in this position after h6, Alexei Sarana went for d5, which is very typical of this position. The point is that once black takes the pawn on d5, you blunt the bishop and then you go ahead with e5. Now in this position after e5, knight d7, bishop e4, he played bishop c6 and bishop c2. Here Praggnanandhaa decided to give up the pawn, which turned out to be a blunder because white got great initiative after that. He could have probably just waited with knight f8, but he played d4, and then this knight came to d4 and knight f5. Now there are threats like knight e7, queen c3. In this position, king f8 is one way to follow, but yeah, that move is pretty awkward to play. Here Praggnanandhaa played rook c e8, and after queen c3 there is this spin, so rook into e3 is never possible. So here Praggnanandhaa played knight f6, but there came rook g3, and then if knight h5, there is rook g4. There is additional threat of rook c4 here. which caused a lot of harm to black's position. Here, Praggnanandhaa played king f8, not the best defense, but the position is already too difficult. After king f8, rook c4 happened, and then after rook c8, there came rook d6. The bishop on c6 is in danger. If black tries to defend it with rook e6, there is rook e6 followed by queen a3. That is what happened in the game. The point is, if king goes to g8, then there is rook takes c6 also, and queen c6, there is this royal fork with knight e7. And if the king goes to f7, then there is knight d6 followed by knight takes c8. And so here Praggnanandhaa resigned after queen a3. Next we have the game between Gorachkina and Adhiban. So Adhiban chose d4 d6 and e4 g6, a very rare way of playing the system of the black side. I have not seen that in recent times. So he got a great position out of the opening, and it did work in his favor, I would say. And all these complications favored him after a point. Yeah, so this position after knight d5, one way was to just give a check here with rook c8 and then play queen d6. Here he decided to go with short castle, and after rook h6, obviously black cannot take the exchange. If black takes bishop h6, is going to get checkmated very soon. So after rook h6, Adhiban played d3, opened the eyes of this bishop, and after rook h1, queen c8, knight c3, rook d8, he has a pleasant position. There is no mate happening anytime soon, and this rook can also join the party. But after rook h7, queen g4, knight d5, Adhiban settled for a repetition here. Objectively, this position is very much in black's favor. For example, after queen c8, knight c3, instead of repeating with queen g4, he could have played queen c4. Now, this decision involves a lot of calculation. For example, after queen c4, white has to check whether rook g7 works or not. If rook g7, there is king g7, queen h6, there is king f6, rook f1, king e7, queen g5, and king e8. And that's the end of checks. After queen e5, queen e6, white's checks are no longer dangerous. For instance, if queen h8, king d7, if queen d4, then there is king c8, if queen c5, then there is king b8, and black has no problems. So this move, queen c4, had to be played. Another variation with rook h8 doesn't work, because after bishop h8, queen h6, there is bishop into c3, and even if the bishop is on c3, it's defending h8, so there is no mate whatsoever. So this was one great chance for Adhiban, but he repeated the position and the game ended in a draw. Next we have the game between Divya Deshmukh and Bivol Alina. I think there was one moment which gave a lot of chance. I think after knight g6, she could have played probably rook d1 or rook d1 here, but she played c5, and this d5 square became very useful to black. Also, the pawn on d4 became weak as more and more pieces got exchanged in the game. You see, first the bishops got exchanged, and then after some point, with this g5, black was able to create more threats based on the weak pawn on d4, and this was clearly in black's favor once the queens were exchanged. So Divya could not create her chances in this game. Next we have the game between Vaishali and Bibi Sara. I think in this game, instead of going for the pawn on a6, maybe Vaishali could have just played queen s3 to play g4, g5. I think this was one way to maintain the pressure. But yeah, she went for a6 pawn, and then she repeated the position, and that's how the game ended in a draw. But I think queen s3 followed by g4, g5 could have been an interesting way to continue. One sample line could be knight e to check, king b1, let's say knight f4, then you play queen e3, and this game goes on. But taking the pawn on a6 also gives a lot of chances for black, and I think draw was okay there. Next we have the game between Alexandra Kosteniuk and Vantika Agrawal. I think there was one moment in this game black had to use prophylaxis against the idea of f4. In this position, Vantika played a5, but she could have played rook h6. The point is, if f4, then there is a rook g7. And if queen e3, black can take the pawn on f4, and let's say rook g7, king e8, knight f4, ef4, let's say rook e7, queen e7, bishop f6. This is all a forced variation. And yeah, they reach this position. I think black is fine here. So this move rook h6 was a smart defense to go to f6 with the rook, but she played a5, and after f4, black's king position was pretty bad, and Kosteniuk Alexandra, the chess queen, exploited it really well, and she won the game. Next, we have the game between Stefanova and Padmini Raut, and I think in this position after g6, bishop d3, she had to play knight d7 to go to e5. She played knight e4, and this I think was a turning point in the entire game. After bishop e4 and queen f6, it is white who is having great position. Even if the queens got exchanged, it is white who will play for a long-term edge because of this bishop and weak pawns. So I think this was one moment which she made a mistake, and then it was always white was better, and Stefanova won this game. Next, we have the game between Harika and Nino Batsiashvili. Here I would say that Harika was in a great shape most part of the game. She blew her winning chances. One moment where I would definitely like to indicate, I think, is this position after bishop f8. She played e6, and her advantage was neutralized. Here she could have played pawn to h4. The point is that if g4, the pawn immediately falls due to rook g6 check, and if g takes h4, then white can play knight h4, and if you take rook takes b2, you can take rook b2, rook b2, and play rook g6 check, winning another pawn. After king h7, white can play bishop takes f7. This is definitely winning. But if bishop g7 here, then there is knight f5, and the bishop hangs. So if you play knight e6, there is bishop into e6, again winning. So this was a key moment. Is h4 I think should have been played, but she played e6, and then the ensuing position was not so easy to win, and Nino defended this, and the game ended in a draw. Now let's take a look at the results. After round 6, we have Alireza Firouzja leading with 4.5 bar 6, and in the women's section we have Li Tiji 5 bar 6. But it's important to note that Grandmaster Sasikiran has also joined the leaders. He's also on 4.5 bar 6. Nihal is in the 9th position right now with 4 bar 6, and in the women's section we have Harika Dronavalli in the 6th position with 4.5 bar 6. Now let's take a look at the standing. At the pairings of round 7, Sasikiran will be playing against MVL and Sargsyan versus Nihal Sarin. Again, two interesting clashes. Now let's take a look at the women's pairings. Here we have Harika Dronavalli playing against woman grandmaster from Poland, Zawarska. And yeah, that's all from my side. I hope you liked the brief coverage of round 6. I'll be back with another video soon. Until then, take care. Bye bye.